Hello, my name is Aaron Siler, and I'm one of the producers here at Plaza Theater Company. Let me give you a short list of some of my favorite things. The melodrama, excitement, and lightsabers of Star Wars, the exciting music of the Gypsy Kings, the comedy and romantic action of The Princess Bride, the incredible music of the musical Les Miserables, and exciting swordplay from TV shows of the 1950s. Now imagine you wrapped all of these things together, and out would come Zorro the Musical. This is the story of our October performance in 2017 of Zorro the Musical. At Plaza Theater Company, we're always looking for new musicals to present to our family-friendly audience. And we're really good friends with a theater that is in the Salt Lake area of Utah. And they put up a show that was Zorro the Musical. It seemed absolutely fascinating. Of course, they do very large shows with expensive sets. And so sometimes we have to discount the shows they do because they're shows that we just don't have enough seats or the financial resources to pull off. But when I researched the musical they were doing, I found that actually this show has never played on Broadway. It only played in London's West End and in Amsterdam and a few other theaters in Europe. And that all the music was from the Gypsy Kings. These are some fantastic flamenco musicians that put out albums that were just guitar of them and their family playing this great music. The vocalist in their group has these haunting vocals, and their music is so exciting and dynamic. I have been a fan of their music for years. So when I pulled up the soundtrack to Zorro the Musical, I found that it was all of their best hits. Really just an amazing thing. So I started researching this. I noticed that there were some orchestrations of the Gypsy King music, which is usually just played by guitar. And I was looking at the credits in the show, and I saw that the orchestration was done by John Cameron. This is the guy that orchestrated the music to Les Miserables, the musical. An incredibly beautiful score. So when I put all of this together and listened to it, the music was amazing. The story was so much fun and exciting. All the fun and excitement that you would want from Zorro. And then to think of mixing that in with the flamenco dancing, with different numbers in the show, I thought this is a show we really need to look into. So we started researching it, and we found that it was being licensed out of a company in Burbank, which was the guy, his family owns the trademark to Zorro. So we contacted him and found that this show had only been performed in the U.S. twice, once in Atlanta and then once at the Hale Center Theater in Salt Lake City, Utah. And so we thought, well, wow, that means that we will be doing a Texas premiere, the first time the show has ever been performed in Texas. And so we went for it. It was a lot more difficult to pull off than what we'd originally planned. Usually with musicals, you will get a libretto, which is the script, the spoken text. You'll get a score that has all the music in it. And for us, since we don't really have space for live musicians, especially when you have an orchestra involved, we'll use pre-recorded tracks. Well, we knew that pre-recorded tracks had existed because the theater in Salt Lake, the Big Large Theater, had pre-recorded tracks. But what we didn't know is that this musical actually had two versions. There was the version that was played in Amsterdam to huge success, and then there was the version that was played in London's West End, also a successful version. And we noticed that the script had been changed, that there were differences. There were some songs included and some songs taken out. There were other songs given to other players. So there was no official version of the script. There was a mixture of two scripts, and you pick which one you want to do, and that's the one you do. And so as the director, I had to read through both of these scripts, compare them, and find which is the best version for us. And I found that the version that I enjoyed the most was the London West End production. And I think primarily because the Amsterdam production was a star vehicle. There was a famous comedic actor in Amsterdam that played the Sergeant Garcia comedic part, and that part had been inflated a little bit to give him more time on stage, whereas the London's West End production was much more story-driven, I felt, than the Amsterdam production. I did some research on the history of Zorro. The story originated from a 1919 novella called The Curse of Capistrano. And in this, it set up the history or the origin story of Zorro. Later became the TV show in the 1950s. However, the musical was also an origin story of Zorro, but it was based on a book written by a Chilean author named Isabel Allende. In this version, it is about two brothers that are the children to the al dente of early Los Angeles. This is colonial California. And he chooses the younger brother to be the new leader and decides to send him to Spain. He doesn't want to go. And there's a girl that he is a childhood friends with named Luisa. She was very upset that he went. And while he was in Spain, he sort of ran away and joined the gypsies and took a performer's life and became irresponsible. And later we find out that his father had passed away through a horsing accident, or did he? And so Luisa goes to find Diego de la Vega in Spain and bring him back because his older brother, who is Ramon de la Vega, not a good guy, who's a classic bad guy. And so Diego de la Vega comes back. He sees the horrible things that are happening to the people in colonial Los Angeles from his brother as an evil ruler. So Diego de la Vega decides to put on the role of a fop. Sort of like the story from Scarlet Pimpernel. He decides to be very foppish, that all he really cares about is clothing and his presentational appearance. And that allows him to stay close to his brother because his brother doesn't see him as a threat. But secretly, as Zorro, he is helping the people of California in Los Angeles. And it allows for a lot of great fun moments to occur when he's putting on this foppish character and then he puts on the black mask and becomes Zorro.
Dancing, sleeping under the stars. Paradise. Everything our father.
So there's several pieces to this show to make it work. Our music director was Shauna Ray. This was, I believe, the last show that she could music direct before she moved to New York City. And really is a great musician and even a better vocal technician, I guess you would say. A voice teacher, is very good at not only in classical training, but extremely good in pop and music theater vocal training, and really had a great time getting the power and the energy out of the vocals in the show. She also played Inez, which has some of the more dynamic solos, let's say, in the show. She was doubled that role with Courtney Mitchell, who is also a very good singer. The dancing was also very important in the show. Our choreographer was Brittany Jenkins. She actually has a bachelor's in dance from Texas Tech University, is the resident choreographer for Kids Who Care in Fort Worth for several years, and has choreographed in a lot of other theaters, including Granbury Theater Company and Artisan Center Theater. She actually choreographed the same show at Artisan Center Theater after we did it. What I really enjoy about her as a choreographer are several things. First off, she has a very good eye for dances that fit the body types and the dancers that she has. She is able to create choreography that is interesting and exciting, but still achievable by the different levels of dancers that she has. And she identifies these dancers very well. She puts them in ways to let them shine, which is very exciting. Another thing that she did in this show is, since we are doing flamenco in the show, she was able to integrate flamenco movements as well, which just made some exciting times to happen in the show. Now, one problem that we have with Zorro is that the musical was written for a different set. It wasn't written for a smaller set in the round like we were doing at our Plaza Main Street Theater. It was written for a much grander scale. And so there were a few times when the scene changes didn't exactly align because we did not have these huge set pieces that could be flown in and out of the theater like they did when they did this on the London's West End. And so working with Brittany, we found some moments to highlight couple dancing to help us in the scene changes. And it was really just a beautiful part of the show. Here you see David Midkiff and McLean Meacham, who came together and did a highlight dance duet that allowed the audience to have something very interesting to look at while we actually changed the set around them in black so that once they were completed, they would run off and we were in a completely different location. It was a really exciting part of the show. In the choreography, there's a great part of the show where a song called Libertad, it's sung by the female peasants of Los Angeles, and I wanted all the women in the cast playing the peasants of Los Angeles to come together to do this powerful song about women singing for their freedom and Libertad. And when I say all the women, I mean all the women. I wanted all ages. I wanted everyone to show that women were united in this and that they were united in colonial Los Angeles. So Brittany put together this choreography where they used chairs and the chairs were rocking together, and this was taken from the London's West End version but then adapted for our In the Round staging, choreographed it in a way where it could be perfectly executed by the female cast members, and it was truly just a powerful moment of the show. When you think about the story of Zorro, it actually is kind of a dark story. You have a guy that's being evil to the peasants of this town, and he is overtaxing them, putting them into prison, and even committing some of them to death because they are taking bread to help feed their families. It's a very dark sounding show. And so when you have a show like this, you have to have comic relief. You have to have something in there that's funny, something there that keeps you going, to remind people this is just a show and we're going to be okay by the end of it. And in Zorro, it is Sergeant Garcia. That is one of his main purposes of this show, and that is to bring comedic relief. And when I first cast Freddie Martinez in this role, I don't think Freddie really believed me of how great I think he was going to be in this role. But once we got into the rehearsals and once he found this part of his character, it just was a delight to watch. He came up with some funny things. We worked on things together. And basically, anytime Sergeant Garcia was out there, something great was going to happen.
Where did everybody go? Oh.
So in the show, Sergeant Garcia falls in love with Inez, who is a friend of Diego de la Vega from Spain, one of the gypsies, and she comes across the boat with him, and then he ends up falling in love with her. And there's this beautiful number where he is trying to tell her that he's in love with her, but he doesn't have the guts to say it, and they have this wonderful interchange.
Where are you going?
Nowhere near Napa Valley. Now you.
Okay.
And again.
Again? Okay. Oh, this is fun.
And again.
Oh, I'm getting dizzy.
Okay.
Mi amor, will you marry me?
One more beer.
One more beer!
Later on in the show, Sergeant Garcia finds out that Inez was shot. It is because of this death that he finds new strength in himself to orate towards in the final scene. He finally steps up to Ramon de la Vega, and of course is absolutely hilarious.
No! From now on, you should fear the mark of G.
Sword fighting. You cannot do Zorro or Zorro the Musical without sword fighting. I got a fight choreographer who I haven't worked with before, and that was Ashley Holland White. And she brought in her friend Carlo as an assistant and put together some fine fight choreography for this show. Watching them work together was a delight. We wanted the fights to be like what you would find in Princess Bride, where you have some fun swordplay, but it has a bit of a comic tone to it as well. You have comedic swordplay, where no one's really going to get hurt, and then you have the serious swordplay to where we mean business. This is the end of the show. I wanted a lot of the large group sword fighting scenes to be like you're watching the A-Team. Now let me explain that. When you watch the A-Team, you see a bunch of guys fighting with guns and nobody's really getting shot, nobody's dying, nobody's getting seriously injured. And so in all of the large group scenes, Zorro isn't killing anyone. If anything, he's just disarming them and humiliating them. That's what makes it fun. Nobody's really getting hurt. They might get popped in the head by the hilt of a sword, but they'll shake it off and they will recover. Also, Sergeant Garcia being the comedic character, I can't have him be a good sword fighter because that's not funny. What's funny is him not knowing exactly what to do. Originally, one of the main sword fights had a part where Zorro called for his horse, Tornado, and his horse pulled a rope and it flew Zorro up into the sky. Well, a few problems with that. At Plaza Main Street Theater, our ceiling is only about 15 foot high. And I can't really throw a guy up into the sky, the audience would see it. 2 is I don't have a horse. 3 is how would I get the manpower behind this rope to pull him up in the sky when all of my men are on stage in a sword fight? So my answer to this is come up with a pants drop. Now I'm not for a pants drop on stage, but at this point it was well done and Freddie Martinez played it perfectly. It always got the huge audience response that it needed and allowed us to put a button on the scene.
No! Why?
In live theater, a lot of times we have to stage a kiss on stage, or we have to stage a man being forceful with a woman. And we're very sensitive to this, especially in family-friendly theater. It needs to convey the story, but it needs to be done in a way that is, one, safe for the actors and safe for the audience. And Ashley is extremely good at this. She is now certified as an intimacy director, but she allowed us to come up with these moments where Alejandro de la Vega was forceful with Luisa, and even though it was difficult to watch and seemingly causing harm, it was done in a way where the actors were completely safe and in control and caring for each other, even though the scene itself was harsh, but yet fitting for the story.
The very least a woman deserves is respect.
Right towards the end of the show, before the final big scene, we have a moment in the audience where we are alone with Luisa as she is preparing to ready herself for her wedding, where she's being forcibly married to save her family and the people of Los Angeles. And the song that she sings is called The Man Behind the Mask, where she sings about Zorro, who she has fallen in love with, and she's lost all respect for Diego de la Vega, even though they are the same person. One of the things I enjoy about theater is ritual. And so what I wanted to do was to make this song a ritual. We see her ritualistically being ready for her wedding. She walks out on stage in her corset and petticoat and a shawl, preparing herself to be dressed for her wedding. And the female members of the cast did the dressing, and we staged it in a way to where it was very much like a dance. It was a ritual. Everything was done in a very specific way in a very specific time, and it created a moment that built tension and told the story of anguish that she was going through at that moment, where she was being forced to marry the man that she didn't want to marry, even though her heart pined for Zorro, the man that was working behind the scenes to help her free the people of Los Angeles.
Trust me, you couldn't trust me. I was a fool to ever feel like this. A little girl dreaming of a kiss. I can't go back.
With everything being said and done in this show, in Zorro, we have to have the big final fight. It is crucial. We have to have this big sword fight at the end, and especially where it's between two brothers. So, Ashley Holland White and Carlo put together this incredible battle. that I was then able to take and time with music that we were given. And it really came out to an exciting part of the show.
Diego? My little brother.
Fight choreography done well is safe for the actors and well rehearsed. As a rule of thumb, you should rehearse 10 hours for every single minute of fight choreography. And Jesse Bowen playing as Zorro, and Diego de la Vega and Matt Victory playing as Ramon de la Vega worked, I would say, that same amount of time. The interesting thing is, also when you're doing fight choreography, you start off doing it very slow. And so I had timed the music with their fight choreography at opening, and we found that as things went on, they got better at it, and so it got faster and faster. And I had to go in about every week and a half and actually adjust the music to deal with their increased speed. The ensemble in this show did a fantastic job. They brought so much action and energy. It really gave it a whole new energy of its own. They were also very much invested in all of us together putting on the best show possible, and that is something I love that happens when you have a cast that comes together and they're dedicated to the show. One thing I appreciated about this script is that it integrated moments from the movies and the TV shows. The iconic Zorro moments can be found in the musical. One of those is Zorro's use of magic. Now, the great thing about this origin story is that it shows that he learned his magic from his gypsy shows that he would do in Spain from the gypsies when they were performing as street performers. But he used that same magic to fool the bad guy, and that is so much fun. Here's a moment in the show where he actually makes him think that he's standing there, and the bad guy, his brother, Ramon, believes that he's going to kill him by throwing a sword inside of them, but in actuality, he has escaped. It's a classic magic trick, and it works so well in the show. The costumes in the show were beautiful. The costume design was done by Tina Barris, and she did a lot of research on her own of finding out the colors and the textures that would match the gypsies and the flamenco dancing, what would look well and what would look great onto the stage, and was able to put together this entire costume design for the show, but also bringing in those iconic elements, those iconic pieces that you would need. Zorro has to have a hat of a certain type. I forget what that name is. Zorro has to have a certain kind of hat. He has to have a mask. It's good for him to have a cape at a few times in the show. And all those things were put together so well by Tina. The way that the skirts would fly in the dancing just gave the choreography a whole new dimension of movement, of sight and sound. It really made it for a very beautiful show. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today as we talked about Zorro the Musical. If you didn't get to see the show, I really wish you could have seen it. It was a beautiful show. Hopefully sometime in the future we'll get to do it again in the next few years. But other than that, my name is Aaron Siler. Thank you so much for joining us.